east across the United States. Heavy snow fell in parts of Michigan yesterday as a cold front passed through the region, and bitter cold temperatures are expected to hit from Canada through the deep south on Friday. CBS News weather producer David Parkinson joins me now with a look at the incoming cold weather. So, David, what's in store?
Yeah, so this is just round one of two. The second round, the early next week round, is the one you are really going to be feeling. But yeah, that is some snow on the radar just pushing in off the Great Lakes, but it is a wet rain and a cold rain that is existing from Pittsburgh up to New York City, up towards Boston as well. I don't think you're going to be seeing any of this snows. You can see some of the heavier spots right around the Finger Lakes make its way too much closer to New York City. So that's the good news. But that is a brief reprieve before things get really, really cold. So we've got record cold highs tomorrow. What does that mean? It means normally we get above this temperature, and there's never been a day where we haven't gotten above this temperature on that particular date. So that means 39 for your high in New York City, 39 for Providence, the freezing mark for Worcester, 33 for Bangor, and then 33 from Saginaw back to South Bend, and 28 in Green Bay. So it is going to be chilly, but the larger problem is a much larger pattern change. So after we deal with this, we have this high pressure system that's going to be scooting down behind this cold front. It is going to bring with it Arctic air from Canada. And so the problem that you're going to end up having is that as it slides south, it is going to slide as far south as the Mexican border. In fact, all of this cold air is just streaming in, and so what you're going to have is 150 cold records early next week. It is going to be just brutally cold with all of this air just coming in straight from the poles. So as we take a look at what the numbers are going to look like next week, the issue is going to be just simply how deep this goes and how far it extends. So on Monday, sure, this is what this looks like, but it will continue to push east over the next couple of days. So New York, the East Coast, that's going to be seeing it Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. There is no reprieve in sight. So while you do have a smidgen of warmth on Sunday, maybe get out and enjoy it, because you're going to really need those heavy coats come early next week.
We are going to pull those coats out of the closet, David. Thank you very much for joining us. David Parkinson.
Well, another report says the Amazon forest is drying out and human activity is to blame. A new NASA study says that over the past couple of decades, moisture levels in the atmosphere above the Amazon have noticeably dropped, which is putting the jungle in peril. RT America's Alex Mihailovich joins us with more. Hello, Alex.
Hi, Steve.
All right, so let me ask you, some call the Amazon the lungs of the planet, and if that's not healthy, that could mean problems for the entire human population. So what could you tell us about what's going on?
Well, absolutely. It's what you mentioned off the top. So this dryness is happening in the atmosphere above the Amazon. And what happens then, over the past couple of decades, NASA has seen that this has really been on the rise. What happens is that the forest needs more water. So there's a demand for more water from other places. But at the same time, it's very difficult to make up for that atmospheric, usually the moisture that exists there. So what happens then? Well, you get droughts. You can also get a lot of forest fires, as we've been seeing in the Amazon just this past year. Now, according to NASA, it says that it has used data over spans of thousands of years, and it has determined that this change in the atmosphere is not something that they've seen before, so it leads them to believe that this is due to human activity. So what are we doing wrong? That's the big question. Well, first of all, you blame half of the issue on greenhouse gases. So this is something that we've been hearing about a lot, greenhouse gases, how they're basically stifling the Earth's atmosphere. But at the same time, and even the bigger issue, and something that's more directly that is attributed to us, is the burning down of the Amazon jungle. And this is done for agricultural purposes as well as for grazing purposes, again, tied to agriculture, for the cows to get out there and to have some land to graze. They're burning down forests. So that is not a good thing. Obviously, this forest itself, when you see this happening and the fires like that happening, the forest gets warmer. And that added to the fact that in the past 50 years, we've chopped down about 20% of the forest, and not only for these purposes, but for paper, etc. Well, it puts the Amazon in peril. And of course, them being the lungs of the earth, as you just mentioned, that puts us in peril.
All right, so working under the assumption that the NASA report is totally accurate, that brings me to the next question. What can this mean for the planet and for, the human race, if you will, or, humans in general?
Well, NASA report or not, we know one thing about the Amazon. It's the biggest rainforest that we have on the face of this planet. It's a massive amount of land. It would be the 9th biggest country in the world if the Amazon was a country itself. Now, that said, forget about this whole atmosphere thing. Think of the riches within the Amazon itself. So we're looking at 2,000 species of animals, including some that likely have not even been discovered. Added to that, we have millions and millions of plants. We're talking about 3 million plus plant species. And as we know, and we've seen in the past, some of these plants could very well be used for medicines in the future. And we might not even discover them when we see that these forests are burning down. They might go extinct. So about the animals, though, I just want one very, I think, interesting point is that 1 in 10 species, when it comes to animals, lives in the Amazon jungle. So that's absolutely massive. And on top of that, if we're talking about the lungs of the earth, well, the lungs of the earth, the Amazon itself sucks up billions of pounds, or tons, I should say, of CO2s, carbon dioxide a year, and basically through photosynthesis, and cleans our atmosphere. So with the Amazon, our temperature is regulated for the whole planet, as well as the fact it regulates climate. So climate change or not, we know that this Amazon, that the jungle functions to do that. So obviously, if this jungle dries up, well, guess what? We're probably going to dry up too. That's the sad end of that story. But look, we still have 80% to work with, so hopefully we can step in and do something about this.
All right, Alex, thank you very much. Good report.
Thank you.
It's hard to clear through the debris and get right down to the nitty-gritty that is real news.
New details are coming to light in the case of Jeffrey Epstein as more
spread between the 2-year Treasury yield and the 10-year Treasury yield. Several hundred students are staging a sit-in
in the Amazon rainforest, and the blame game is underway. It's time for RT America. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
At least 47 people have been killed in an attack on mining employees in Burkina Faso. A convoy carrying staff from a Canadian-owned mine was targeted in the east. They were being escorted by the military. Nicholas Huck joins us now live from Dakar. So, Nicholas, why are miners being targeted?
Well, what's interesting, Sammy, with this attack, it happened in the east of the country, bordering Benin and Niger, not in the borders that border Mali, which is where most of the attacks took place. On Sunday, there was an attack on the deputy mayor of Djibi, someone that we had interviewed, and he was assassinated and killed on the Mali border. So this attack taking place in the east of the country is highly unusual. It shows that the armed groups involved in these attacks have spread across the country. And it comes at a time where the defense minister of France visited Burkina Faso just on Monday, announcing that it's expanding its military operation from Mali into Burkina Faso, both in the east, west, and north of the country. This is a conflict that is really expanding throughout the Sahel, and the governments in place, whether in Burkina and Mali, are struggling to contain these attacks. There was an attack on this same road back in December against police officers. No one had claimed responsibility for these attacks, but security forces suspect that this attack has the hallmarks of the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara. And you were asking why the gold mines and these mining operation? Well, because gold mining is taking place in these bordering areas where these armed groups are active. And in a Reuters investigation dating back from April, it explains how a lot of these gold mines, this gold is being exported to the United Arab Emirates illegally, and some of it may be funding these armed groups active in Burkina Faso. So these armed groups don't want to see private company coming from foreign companies, mining companies coming in their territory, mining their gold, which they think is their rightful ownership.
All right,
Sammy?
Nicholas Hug there. Thanks so much.
Reporting tonight after that horrific ambush of American families in Mexico. 3 mothers and 6 of their children were all killed. Family members returning to the scene today. One of the cars there riddled with bullets and burned inside the vehicle. A mother and her 4 children were killed. And tonight here we learn more about another mother who left her infant in the car to put her hands in the air to show that they were innocent. She did not survive. The baby did. ABC's Tom Llamas from Mexico tonight.
Tonight, relatives of the American family ambushed in Mexico are demanding justice. Their anger reignited after visiting the crime scenes, seeing the drug cartel's carnage up close. Their loved ones' vehicles filled with massive bullet holes. In total, 9 people killed, including 6 children. Tonight, the family telling me the men who killed their relatives are animals.
Who opens fire on women and children?
Julian Lebaron, a relative, was tasked with finding the families after they realized something had gone wrong. He discovered one of the mothers, Christina Langford's SUVs. She was dead on the floor, her arms spread out, 2 gunshot wounds in her chest. In the passenger seat, her baby Faith. Julian shot this video of the infant. A gunshot had gone through the canopy of the car seat.
We found the baby, and underneath the car seat there was 2 more bullet holes.
The victims all part of an extended family, a fundamentalist Mormon sect that has lived and worked in northwest Mexico for decades. Today, the Mexican government explaining in this remote border region, 2 different cartels are locked in a war. They think since the families were traveling in SUVs, they may have been mistaken as narco gang members. One of the reasons why the drug cartels are so prominent in this area is because it is a remote border region. Just driving through here, as you can see, is incredibly difficult. There are never-ending winding roads, mountains everywhere you look. It's so hard to get here, and that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to police. And yet, despite this rough, dangerous terrain, 13-year-old Devin Blake Langford trekked for 14 miles after his family's car was attacked, his siblings bleeding from gunshot wounds. When he didn't return quickly, his 9-year-old sister Mackenzie set out too, walking for several hours before briefly getting lost. Their mother Donna found dead when help arrived, and today some of the youngest survivors recovering in a hospital as this family copes with an unimaginable tragedy. David, tonight we're not far from where this massacre took place, and you'll notice the large military presence just behind us. There's also a police presence as well. They're protecting the roads, but they're also protecting the surviving family members here in this area of Mexico. And tonight we did speak with the father of those 2 heroic children. He was fighting back tears as he called it a miracle, what they did. But he also says this has destroyed his family, and he's not sure the family can stay living here. David?
All right, Tom Yamas and the team, please stay safe.
Pretty scary at Twitter. Federal prosecutors have accused 2 former employees of manipulating the social media platform to spy for Saudi Arabia. Our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas is in Washington with the details. Good morning, Pierre.
George, good morning. It's a deeply disturbing story. Allegations of compromised Twitter employees willing to access and steal the private information of users who are seen as critics of the Saudi government, which the CIA has accused of assassinating a Washington Post journalist. Twitter now part of so many lives, a place to share that users hope will be safe, protected. But this morning, accusations by federal prosecutors that a Saudi official bribed 2 former Twitter employees to spy on users. The alleged targeted users, critics of the Saudi government, and accusations of bribes involving hundreds of thousands of dollars.
The wake-up call here is not only for Twitter, but for the other platforms to up their game in their personnel screening, to up their game in their cybersecurity.
The information potentially accessed includes addresses, phone numbers, emails, dates of birth, and access to the postings of users. Former Twitter employee Ahmad Abu-Omo was arrested in Seattle this week, accused of accessing the Twitter profile of a prominent critic of the royal family who has more than 1 million followers. Another suspect in the case, Ali Al-Zabara, an engineer at Twitter, allegedly accessed the private data of users en masse, accused of collecting information on more than 6,000 users, including at least 33 who were the target of Saudi Arabian law enforcement officials. Twitter has released a statement saying, in part, quote, "We recognize the links bad actors will go to try and undermine our service. We understand the incredible risk faced by many who use Twitter to share their perspectives with the world and to hold those in power accountable. We're committed to protecting those who use our service to advocate for equality, individual freedoms, and human rights." Guys?
All right, Pierre.
Defense ministers of Russia and India, they instead have been trying to meet. They're doing so in Moscow now to make sure that they can be on the same page when it comes to military cooperation and to agree on the details of joint future projects. Here now with more on this is RT's Yulia Shapovalova.
India intends to expand its military cooperation with Russia. That was stated on Wednesday at talks between Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu and his Indian colleague Rajnath Singh in Moscow. More than 70% of all the weapons and military equipment belonging to the Indian Army, Navy and the Air Force are Russian or Soviet made. Every year, Russia sells several $1 billion worth of arms to India.
We have reaffirmed our commitment to comprehensive cooperation with Russia and the development of the military technical cooperation between our defense industry companies, as well as to strengthening cooperation between our armed forces.
Sergei Shoigu described the South Asian superpower, the largest importer of Russian weapons, as a friendly country with whom Russia has reliable and solid relations in many areas, not just military. A number of important joint military and technical projects are currently being undertaken by Moscow and New Delhi. Among them are deliveries of the S-400 air defense systems to India and the manufacture of the 11356 project frigates to its navy. Preparations are also underway for the production of Kalashnikov rifles in India, but despite that, some plans need to be revised, according to Mr. Shoigu.
There are a lot of issues related to our military technical cooperation. They require special control on our part. Despite the fact that all our plans are being implemented quite successfully, nevertheless, they require attention and some changes.
There is a number of issues that are currently under discussion. For example, a Russian-Indian project to create a fifth-generation fighter, which has been frozen by the Indian side, plus the fate of the pending agreement on the supply of 48 Mi-17 V5 helicopters is still not clear, and the terms of a future contract for the construction of light Ka-226 helicopters in India are also being discussed. Besides, Russia is actively participating in various Indian tenders. One of them, the tender for the supply of man-pads to the country, Russia has already won. For another one, the medium multi-role combat aircraft tender to supply Delhi with 110 fighters, the winner has not yet been determined, but Moscow hopes the new MiG-35 will win. The Indian defense minister noted that India decided to restructure its part of the Russian-Indian Intergovernmental Commission on Military and Technical Cooperation in order to increase the pace and scope of the cooperation with the Russian armed forces. Singh emphasized that the recent meeting of the leaders of the two countries in Vladivostok in September contributed to the deepening of Indian-Russian relations. Back then, the countries signed an intergovernmental agreement on cooperation and supply of components for Russian and Soviet-made equipment. Under the terms of that deal, Russian manufacturing enterprises will assist in production of those spare parts in India. The sides also agreed that India will send its military personnel to participate in the Victory Day parade, which will be held on Red Square on the 75th anniversary of the victory in World War II in 2020. Rajnath Singh was appointed as India's Minister of Defense on May 31st, 2019, and it was his first meeting with his Russian counterpart here in Moscow.
Hey, thanks so much. Julia Shepbalaba
against inequality in Chile are in their third week. President Sebastián Piñera is resisting calls for him to resign. At least 18 people have been killed, hundreds injured, and more than 4,000 detained since these demonstrations began. For more on what's happening in Chile, we reached Guardian reporter Jonathan Franklin in Santiago. He has more on what the scene is like there.
Well, you can see in my eyes, I just got tear gassed, and I'm actually holding the camera running around because the protesters have decided to storm the financial heart of Santiago, including a building called Costanera Center. So there's hundreds of riot police trying to keep the protesters from either taking over or torching or looting this massive mall. So it's pretty chaotic here in the center of Santiago right now.
What was the scene like when you were tear gassed?
They have a little truck they call the Skunk, and it drives around an armored like little tank that just shoots big like a hose full of tear gas on people. There's thousands of people running around the streets here. We've got about 1,000 injured on each side, about 1,000 injured police and about 1,000 injured protesters, which is completely off the normal. Chile's a generally extremely peaceful and non-violent country, but things have gone totally haywire.
Mm-hmm. How does this experience compare to what you've been seeing on the streets?
It's really crazy. By day, it's often beautiful. There's all sorts of cultural town meetings. Thousands of people are gathering to discuss the Constitution. And at night, it's like, Blade Runner or Mad Max, just looting and arson. And so it's really it's really an insurrection. This is a rejection of the entire Chilean political class. The president's approval rating is 9%, and there's basically no politician over 20%. It's just, there's a complete rejection of the political class here that it's quite remarkable.
I want to talk to you about what might help end this, but we did speak to you before, and there was a lot of violence on the streets. We're seeing interactions between protesters. We're seeing some tear gas being thrown in the footage that we're showing as well. So can you bring us up to speed on those interactions, the conflict that you've seen on the streets between these people who are so upset and authorities?
Basically, it's like these regime changes when you see, for example, in the Mideast, they're toppling all the government statues. There's really kind of a claim for Sebastián Piñera to step down. That's not likely to happen. This is Chile, where institutions were quite strong, but think about something like the Catholic Church. 20 or 30 years ago, the church would have been a major player in this social upheaval. Now the church has no voice. We may also be finding out that the institution of politics, the political parties, the Congress, the president, really don't have much of a voice. There's a massive call. Some 85% of Chileans want to write their own constitution. So it's also a very interesting experiment in democracy that we're seeing. And it's got ugly edges like the violence, and it's got beautiful moments like the culture and the dancing. And it could be historic in that the Chileans are trying to find a way to create their own constitutions and their own democracy with a new constitution.
So how would you characterize how both sides are handling things?
Terribly. It's like watching. It's very distressing. For example, to watch in the Congress, the left bashes the right bashes the left. Nobody seems to put the country's best interests ahead of anything else. Very, very petty. Even the human rights groups, vying for who can be more famous on TV. It's really disgusting kind of in the streets, but when you scratch that surface, there's tens of thousands of people having town meetings, debating the Constitution. Chile is going to make some sort of history here. The question is, which way is it going to end up? Which way do you think it's going to end up? I think it's going to end up with the fall of the president. I wouldn't have said that a week ago, but I think the president will fall and they will have new elections. Yeah, what signals that to you, Jonathan? Sorry, you're being drowned out. Can't hear anymore. Things are starting. I think we have to cut out now because things are going to start to get ugly again. Okay, we appreciate this update, Jonathan. We hope you get better from that tear gas. Guardian reporter Jonathan Franklin joining us earlier from Santiago, Chile.
One of the most prolific identity thieves they've seen in years. Currently, she's behind bars. She is accused of stealing the personal information of at least 20 people. But here's the thing. Police admit they do not know the full extent of her alleged crimes. We've got CBC's John Lancaster right here in studio. This is an investigative piece. This woman, she looks normal to me when I saw her picture, but who is she? What is she accused of?
Well, her real name, and actually even that's debatable, is Deborah Oguntayimbo. There's various spellings of that in various police databases. Some agencies have her as Deborah, D-E-B-R-A, others D-B-O-R-A. She has about 10 aliases. And police allege she's racked up more than 50 charges now recently across 4 GTA jurisdictions, all relating to people's theft of their identity. She's alleged to have somehow managed to access their banking information, then their social insurance numbers, and she essentially clones these people. And she's racked up all sorts of bills, destroyed credit ratings. One woman we spoke to who is an alleged victim of Oguntayimbo said she first noticed something was wrong in early June. She couldn't log into her bank account. Then within days, more than 20 credit card, bank loans, and car loans were applied for her name. And the surprises kept coming. Here's what she told us.
I got a congratulations email in the congratulations letter in the mail saying that I bought a Range Rover.
Leased it or bought it?
Leased it, yeah. So I would have been $80K.
That must have been, after all this.
Yeah.
What went through your mind when you get this letter and open it? And
well, I was just thinking, what's next? When am I going to pick up my Range Rover now?
Goodness, and I can't imagine opening that piece of mail, but you've got me hooked here. What happened next?
Well, it didn't end there, Suhana.